Hi, I'm Caitlin Lefton, and this is my cat video with the muscles. So we're going to start off with the head, and this bone right here, which is the mandible, and that's the lower bone in the jaw. Right here on either side, you have the digastric muscles. In between those is a really tiny muscle called the glenohyoid. Underneath the glenohyoid is the mylohyoid. And underneath the mylohyoid is the sternohyoid. On the side here, you have the masseter, and right here you have the external jugular vein. And passing underneath this vein is a muscle called the sternomastoid. So moving on to the thoracic region, we have a band of muscle that goes all the way across here, and that's called the pectoantebrachialis. Underneath that muscle is the pectoralis major. And underneath the pectoralis major is another triangular muscle, and that's the pectoralis minor. On either side of the pectoralis minor is a very, very thin layer of muscle called the xipha humerales, and that attaches down here on the xiphoid process. Okay, so next we're going to talk about some more muscles of the chest. One that I want to point out is the epitrochlearis, and another one is the tricep, right here. So those are both superficial muscles of the chest, and then we're going to move into the deeper muscles of the chest. The first one we're going to talk about is the rectus thoracis. The next one is the rectus abdominis. And then we have the scalenus muscles. The first one is the anterior. The medius is the next one, and then the posterior. And the point of these muscles is to flex your neck and to draw your ribs forward when you take a breath. Another one to point out is the serratus ventralis, and this muscle functions to help pull your scapula forward. Then we have the subscapularis, and the subscapularis is a muscle of your rotator cuff, and it helps with moving your humerus medially. Then we have the teres major and the coracobrachialis right next to it. And then the big flap on the side is the latissimus dorsi. And this comes all the way from your back and attaches up to your chest. Then we're going to move down to the abdomen, and we're going to talk about the obliques. So the first one we're going to talk about is the transverse abdominis. That's the bottom layer. And the transverse abdominis runs transversely across your abdomen, which is how it gets its name. Then you have the internal oblique. And the internal oblique functions to help compress your abdomen, and its fibers run perpendicular to that of the external oblique, which is the layer on top. The external oblique also functions to help compress your abdomen. Then we're going to point out the linea alba, which is the line right down the center. And the rectus abdominis is the last thing I'm going to talk to you about. So the rectus abdominis muscles help make up your abs that form the six-pack that everyone tries to get by working out all the time. And those are all of the abdominal muscles that we're going to talk about right now. The next part of the muscle system that I want to talk about is the upper forelimb. So some of these we pointed out already, but I'll mention them again. We have the acromiotrapezius right here, and the levator scapulae right next to it, then the teres major right here. Then we have the triceps lateral head, the triceps long head, and the triceps medial head. And all of these muscles work together to help extend the forelimb. Then we have the brachialis right here. And the brachialis functions to help flex the forelimb. Then, again, like we talked about earlier, we have the clavodeltoid, right here. And last but not least, the aconius. And this muscle aids the triceps in extending the upper forelimb. And that concludes the muscles in the upper forelimb. We are now going to talk about the lower lateral forelimb. So the first thing I want to point out is the brachioradialis right here. And it's very thin. You got to be careful not to tear it. The next part is the extensor carpi radialis longus. And then we have the extensor carpi radialis brevis right next to that. And these two function to extend the carpal bones in the wrist. And actually that brachioradialis, that thin muscle that we talked about, helps to supinate the front paw, or in humans it would supinate your hand. Then we have the extensor digitorum communis and the extensor digitorum lateralis. Next to that we have the extensor carpi ulnaris, and then we have the flexi carpi ulnaris. And this muscle helps to flex or adduct the wrist. And last but not least, we have the alconius, which we pointed out in the last section, and that's right here on the elbow. And that's the end of the entire forelimb. The next muscles that I want to talk about are the superficial muscles of the back and the shoulder. The first one I want to point out is the levator scapulae ventralis. And the function of this muscle is to help pull the scapula forward. Then I want to point out the spinodeltoid, the acromiodeltoid, and the clavodeltoid. The function of the clavodeltoid is to aid in flexion of the forelimb. And something interesting about this is that cats have 3 deltoid muscles, like I just mentioned, but humans only have 1 deltoid muscle. The next thing that I want to point out is the triceps long head. Then we have the triceps lateral head, which is the larger one right above it. So now we're going to move on to the deeper muscles of the back and the shoulder. The first one is the clavotrapezius. And the clavotrapezius helps to move the scapula cranially and dorsally. Then we have the acromiotrapezius. And the acromiotrapezius helps hold the scapula in place. And the last trapezius muscle is the spinotrapezius. And this helps to pull the scapula towards the tail of the cat and dorsally.